6:05. I was going to wait till 6:05 to give people an opportunity to join. But thank you so much and welcome to the Climb Boardroom event. This is our second event for this year, and this is our fireside chat. So I appreciate everyone who took the time to come out and discuss this very important topic. So today we are discussing Beyond the Pivot, navigating your next career move. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our amazing panel. And then as the fireside chat goes on, feel free if you have questions to raise your hand, or you can also communicate in the chat if that is easier for you. Okay, starting with Miss Eliana Cardeno. Eliana is an accomplished professional with a diverse background spanning nonprofit management, entrepreneurship, and community leadership. With over a decade dedicated to nonprofit management, Eliana hones skills in strategic planning, fundraising, and advocacy, making significant impacts in the sector. Currently serving in the corporate entrepreneurship at Travelers, Eliana brings innovative and forward-thinking strategies to the insurance industry. This role builds upon her entrepreneurial spirit, which led to the establishment of the skincare subscription business in 2018. Showcasing a bold approach to market trends and consumer needs. Eliana resides in Boston and is deeply involved as the founder of the Bold Women Collective. I love that name. This vibrant community empowers and supports women navigating career transitions, ding, 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 providing a platform for networking, mentorship, and professional growth. Through the Bold Women Collective, she continues to drive positive change and foster connections among women professionals. With a passion for empowering others and a track record for entrepreneurial ventures, Eliana exemplifies leadership and dedication in both corporate and community settings. Welcome, Eliana. You can say hello to everyone.
Thank you, Felicia. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Next, I'm going to introduce Desiree Goldey. Desiree Goldey is the Director of Marketing at the ZRG Partners and founder of Do Better Consulting. She's a recognized leader in executive coaching, leadership, DEIB, and marketing strategy. As a 2024 top HR innovator by Pillar and a certified executive coach, she has expertise in leadership development and DEI. She transcends various industries, including sports, hospitality, consumer packaged goods, manufacturing, and talent acquisition. Desiree's approach to leadership, talent acquisition, and executive coaching integrates core principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging, enhancing leadership effectiveness and fostering an inclusive workplace culture. Welcome, Desiree.
Hello, so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
And last but not least, we have Madjeen Lorthe. Madjeen is a certified life and career transition coach with over 2 decades of experience in nonprofit work and the mental health field. She is the founder of Transitions Well Done, a coaching practice committed to centering the lived experience of women of color as they navigate significant life transitions. Are y'all seeing the theme? With a focus on self-exploration and resilience building, Madjeen specializes in understanding and addressing the unique challenges faced by this community through targeted services designed to navigate personal and professional transitions. She equips clients with the tools and confidence needed to succeed while prioritizing their well-being amidst cultural identity, social expectations, and systemic barriers. Her approach fosters professional growth, personal fulfillment, and a strong sense of community among women of color as they navigate life changes. Welcome, Madjeen.
Thank you, Felicia. So happy to be here and excited for this conversation.
Awesome. And Madjeen is also one of our executive champions as a part of the Climb.
I know, it's been such a journey getting to know you and getting to know the Climb. So excited to do the work along with you all and all the other champions.
Awesome. So let's dive in. So I'm going to start with a little background and then we will get into our questions for the panel. On average, Americans change jobs 12 times during their careers. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, this figure includes both significant and career shifts. So some of the common reasons we find people changing careers include seeking better pay, work-life balance, sometimes job dissatisfaction, layoffs, and industry changes. Increasingly, individuals are pursuing career changes for personal growth and to align to their values. So what better time to have a conversation about how you navigate those positions, whether it is something that you are seeking or something that happens along your journey? How do you navigate that? So we're going to start off with a very fundamental question because we've been talking about both transition and change. But let's talk about the difference between those two. So Madjeen, can you help us out on what is the difference between a transition and a change?
I think the definition of both is important because it would definitely help you as you're navigating your career pivot. Those two words are often used interchangeably, and I think they're very different. Not in the sense of, you know, playing words, but also the true definition. So if you think of it, think of change as the life events that are happening externally. For example, the layoffs that have been happening, and how are you managing that change internally? And that's where the transition piece comes in. Think of change as external and constant, and transition is the internal process of the change that you're experiencing. It is psychological, and it happens through phases of re-identification and renewal. You are making a choice when you are transitioning, because when you're experiencing a change, you can decide to just focus on the logistics of what's happening. I lost my job, I'm gonna get a new job, I'm gonna relocate to find a job, but not paying attention to what the internal shifts that you're feeling internally and how you're responding through the changes outside of, you know, in our world, and on both macro and micro level. If you're focusing only on the external factors, you'll find yourself feeling stuck, right? And bumping up against some resistance to the change that's happening. And so although transition happens in phases, it is not linear in terms of us being able to control the timing of it. So you can't say that, oh, I'm going through this for only a specific amount of time. If you're truly stepping into the phases of transition where you're letting go and you're stepping into the unknown to start a new chapter, there's a lot of spaces in between that you're having to develop a new identity, letting go of your old identity before you can step into the new one. And I think that's where people tend to fear the change that's happening, because there's this, you know, the plates are moving within, and you're not really able to identify what's happening, because most of us fall prey to this. We're really focusing on what's next without really reflecting on what's happening internally.
That is a big distinction, because to your point, particularly if it's something like a layoff or something, you're thinking to yourself, how do I just recover? Not necessarily how do I feel? How do I process those emotions? I think that's probably very tough. So in that vein, how can one identify if they're undergoing a deeper transition in their career? So we're not talking about the layoffs, but if you know there's a transitioning happening in your career. Desiree, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I think Madjeen hit on some of it, right? It's this physical and almost emotional thing that's happening, right? I know for me, when I was ready to make some of those transitions, it became almost physical and emotional. I was feeling sick or feeling, you know, depressed, or all of those things were happening. And I realized that something was happening externally that was making me feel this way. It had nothing to do with what was still doing my job. I was still doing all these regular things, but something was happening that was forcing me to say, I think it's time to make a move, right? I also think there's some external things that happened. There's emergence of new opportunities. All of a sudden, because you've been networking and you've been seeing all these things, all of a sudden these things start to keep popping up that you're starting to actually recognize that you may have missed before. They probably were there, right? But all of a sudden now you're seeing them because you're ready to make that deeper moment happen. And I think that's super important to recognize. I know when we're forced to look for a job, right? We're looking intentionally for that job. But sometimes when we're going through an emotional transition, where all of a sudden these things start popping up as what we call signs, right? That we should be making that transition. And if we would just stop and listen to them sometimes, it actually helps that transition happen a little bit faster. And when we talk about careers, I think everybody knows dissatisfaction, right? You can still do the job, you've been there doing it, and now it just doesn't feel right, right? Maybe you're just not putting as much effort into it, you're not feeling as good about it, you're not feeling as great about the results. And that dissatisfaction, even though you know you're very capable of doing it, that dissatisfaction you feel at your performance and maybe is seen by others sometimes, that is definitely a sign automatically, right? Or it's dissatisfaction with the people even around you at your job. You're like, oh, how do I still work with these people, right? You know, I've worked with them for 5 years. I'm like, ugh, I need to move on. Like that's a sign as well. We could talk about, 15 other signs, but I think recognizing those signs or getting someone to help you recognize those signs as that you're going through this deeper transition. That's what coaches are great for, by the way, is a good thing to have, because sometimes we just miss them and we just choose to ignore them. But actually we're going through a transition, and sometimes we're forced into that transition, but a lot of times we've already been going through it. And something then forces us in and pushes us to finally making the decision. I encourage people on this call to think about and do a lot of self-assessment before they're forced to make those transitions or forced to make those decisions. Think about along the way, always recognizing, looking at what are you happy? Are you feeling satisfied? Are you feeling fulfilled? If you're constantly reassessing those things, then the transitions don't feel as hard, if that makes any sense.
That does. Eliana, you had something you wanted to add?
No, I was actually, it seemed like a good segue into my question, and I definitely don't want to jump the gun, but one of the things I wanted to share, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share it, but it's something that I think it's ingrained in us women, is that there's this feeling of shame when something that we don't expect happens. And at the beginning of this week, my entire team, including myself from Travelers, got laid off. And so it's sort of this feeling of shame, of uncertainty and ambiguity. So that's kind of like the question that I was going to answer. It was like, how can we embrace this ambiguity and this uncertainty? Because it almost felt like a breakup that I was not expecting to happen. And with that comes shame and fear and shock and all the things that we as women feel, but are often told not to say out loud or not to show our emotions. But really, I've done all the things that Desiree just mentioned. I've done it's sort of encouraged my creativity. It's helping me adapt. And I think this is a great time for me to foster this change and have it promote more of a growth mindset within myself, which I think is what people should look at it. The ambiguity and the uncertainty can promote a growth mindset, because you can take that time, as Desiree mentioned, to look within yourself, to see what your aptitudes are, what your values might be, and how can you use that to either make a change in your career or a transition into something else. And that's what I'm hoping to do. I've been wanting to start 2 businesses. One is my Bold Women Collective, is to really kind of develop it within the city of Boston and then hopefully nationwide, and then to start a skincare business. And so now what I'm going to do is not look for any jobs at the moment, but really focus on this now new transition in my life, once more a transition, and really embrace again that feeling of ambiguity and uncertainty. As much as it is scary and as much as might bring us shame, it's still sort of promoting all these things that I think are important for us: learning, creativity, growth mindset, problem-solving skills, and an opportunity to find some hidden talents, hopefully, and be successful on my own.
It's amazing. I'm excited for your journey. It's sad to hear the news, but you seem to have done all the work to get you to where you're at. So that's super exciting. That's what I think sometimes people think the transition part is the easy part. It's the hardest, the work you have to put in to be able to make that transition effective and stick almost is the hard work. And it takes a lot of self-reflection. Right.
It
And
truly
not
does.
everybody's great at that.
Yeah, and we have so many responsibilities as women, as mothers, as wives, as everything. We have so many responsibilities, and it almost feel like, are we letting others down because we are trying to make these changes, because we are trying to make these transitions? And that kind of fear, or that like, are we letting other people down, I think really holds us back. And so, and this is work that I've been doing for a very long time. I mean, this is one of many transitions I've done in my life. So from not pursuing dentistry from my parents, and that kind of like, I'm letting them down, to like now this, it's been a lifelong process. And I think it can be for many people, but I certainly encourage you, like you did, encourage all the women in this call to do the same.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's an amazing actually story. And it's amazing how that fit into this fireside chat. I want to ask just a follow-up question on there. And Desiree talked a bit about it before. Like when you're starting to feel these feelings and these emotions, how do you distinguish when the emotion is just a passing period of time? Like let's say you're having a hard month at work, from no, this is something that may require transition. How do you distinguish between the two of those feelings?
I think there's a piece of it of each phase of the transition has its own set of emotions, right? And I think a lot of times we have to remember that every new beginning starts with an end. And we're often struggling with that end because we don't want to let go. We're human creatures of habit. And when sometimes we might have an idea of starting something for a really long time, we're sitting on it. And you know, with what Eliana was saying, we're often taking a really long time to make a decision. We sit on a decision for a really long time because of the way we're socialized, especially as women of color. And all the different identities that we hold come into those emotions, because with every transition, we're bringing in our lived experience. So you're right. Sometimes you're feeling that it's because, oh, I went through that change before and it didn't feel good. So you're already bringing that in rather than stepping into it. If you want that role, stepping into that role rather than thinking of all the past mistake, all the self-doubts, so forth and so on. And I think the fear is really what is rooted in letting go, because then, you know, once you let go, you're stepping into the unknown, and that's where all the uncertainties lie. And that's the piece of, do you embrace that as a place for opportunities, or do you resist it as a place of, or see it as a place of chaos, only of chaos, rather than an opportunity for you to create something new, a rebirth of some sort?
That is awesome. And that actually answered my question. That question was for me, but thank you. That was my question. So I think Eliana started this amazing of sharing a personal story, but I'm going to give, you know, Desiree and Madjeen the opportunity to share some personal stories of career pivots, some of the lessons you learned, and then in all of those the lessons, like how do you redefine what success looks like? And again, I said Eliana did an amazing job of doing that, because sometimes we think of it in a traditional way. So some personal stories. Let's start there.
Yeah, I'll start. So I grew up in a very like go to school, get a corporate job, like type of environment. That was my parents, overachievers to the max, like the whole thing. So that was my path. That was what I was going to take. Went to a very good school. I studied marketing and international marketing, and I traveled to Japan. I was going to work for Nike for the rest of my life. I was going to, you know, do all these great things. I went to work at Nike and hated it. It was probably the worst corporate experience I had ever had in my life, and came back and didn't have a clue what I was going to do. And so my path now has become the most nonlinear it can possibly be. I've had a career in probably every sector in the universe, just because I like to try new things and I feel and I get bored and I like a challenge. So I tend to change, and I've been able to navigate those transitions because of the vision boards and journaling and coaching I've had in the past. And I have a coach, I am a coach and have a coach, because it is necessary for me to be able to have that kind of, focus of where I'm trying to get to. But I always know the goal. I'm just not always sure what the path should be to get there. So my story has been that I got out of, working for Nike, and I went and tended bar. Like I didn't know what to do at that point. I had no clue, and didn't know really what I wanted to do. And so from there, I built a career in hospitality. I just kept seeing what the next step was for me. And I had to keep redefining what success looked like. And it wasn't 10 years all the time. Sometimes it was 6 months. It was like, can you become a good bartender in 6 months, girl? Because you ain't never done this before. So you're gonna figure this out. You know what I mean? And then it was like, can you be a restaurant manager? Sure. And then can you run a foods company? I was director of sales and marketing for a foods company at one point. Like, I think my goals were very targeted. And they were always about achieving success in that role. And then, kind of like I said, because of my personality, I do get bored. And so I would say, well, now I've achieved this goal. What is the next step for me? And it would take me time to figure out what that next step was. And I would have to take a step back and do that self-assessment again about what I was feeling, whether I was still challenged, what would be the next step, and where did I want to go? And then redefining success all over again. And I think success has to be what it means to you. It doesn't mean the numbers. It doesn't mean, you made the company $1 million. It doesn't mean you have some big fancy title. It's whatever's important to you. If that's work-life balance, if that's, a decent salary, you can pay the bills and you're off every weekend, you only work 40 hours, that's success. Success has to be a personal journey. It can't be tied to whatever social thing is defining success at that point. If you looked at my life now, you would probably say I'm successful, but I consider myself successful throughout my career. So, it just, because it doesn't fit what people think is success, doesn't mean I didn't feel like I was succeeding. And I think that's important for people to remember as they go through these transitions, because sometimes transition means starting at the bottom all over again in careers, right? Which is hard for people to do, right? Because if it means a salary pay cut, if it means all these things, first of all, the fear comes in. Second of all, oh my gosh, I was this level, now I'm back down here. But if that's what's going to help you achieve your goal, I think sometimes that's necessary. So my story is varied, but that's the highlights of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that, because you talked a little bit, and this is the challenging part. Like, when you graduate from school or you leave your parents' house, they have specific ideas of what you should become or the path. You may have had a parent who worked one job for 40 years, so they expect you to do that same thing. And then societally, there's expectations. So how do, Eliana, can you share some practical steps on how do you overcome the societal and all those pressures that ask you to follow a traditional path and use that? How do you do that transition?
I'd say everybody has shared a little bit of this information, but I will say that first of all, is understanding that it is challenging, right? There's no shame in understanding and feeling that challenge, but ultimately knowing that it can be really rewarding, because it will be steps that you'll take, because this is something that you want to do for yourself. And I love what Desiree just said about that success can look very different to very different people, and can mean one thing for you and it means something else for somebody else. I love that, because nobody ever really tells you that. People think success is getting married, having kids, having the white picket fence, having the house. but we all come from so many different backgrounds. Like I'm not a suburban kind of girl, I'm a city girl. So for me, it's not having a house in the suburbs, it's being able to maybe afford a rent in Boston or in New York City, right? And so that success to me is different than from somebody else. And so, or it's traveling, right? It's saving money because I want to travel. So that kind of leads me to my first point, which is doing, and Desiree pointed to this, doing a self-assessment, understanding, reflecting on your strengths, right? It's easy to go down on that shame path, but what are your strengths? I mean, you've gotten to this point because of your strengths. Is it adaptability? Is it creativity? Is it your willingness to learn really fast? So understanding those strengths and how you can utilize them for your next pivot or change or transition. Then once you realize what your strengths are, I'd say developing other skills or expertise that you might need in your next career or business or step in your life. It's important. I mean, there's no shame in continuing education. I think it's extremely important. I mean, whether you want to take a cooking class or a sewing class, all those are skills that can be transferable because they show creativity, they show dedication, they show that you want to learn something new. So understanding that even a hobby can have transferable skills. And then I'd say once you understand that, building and articulating your personal brand. Again, not being afraid of speaking up. That's often something that women do, right? And us women of color do. We are afraid to say that we're leaders, that we have skills and strengths that others may not have. We're afraid of asking for more money in our jobs, even though we know we deserve them. And we're afraid to ask for a better title because, again, we feel like we don't deserve it. So articulating your personal value and your value proposition will take you a long way. And then lastly is networking strategically or asking for feedback, right? Leaning on your mentors, on coaches, leaning on people that you trust, or even reaching out to people through LinkedIn and saying, hey, may I have a coffee with you and ask you how you got to the point where you are now? That's how I ended up meeting Madjeen and then meeting Felicia. I mean, these are all things that will help you get to hopefully the point where you want to be. So again, understanding your skills, learning new expertise, articulating the value proposition, and then lastly is networking and seeking feedback from mentors, peers, coaches, and utilizing the people around you, and even those that you may not know, because again, it can really open up a whole new world and new connections.
No, that's really good. One of the things that each of us have touched on but haven't really talked about is coaching. Now, you will notice all of us are coaches. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about how important or pivotal a coach can be in your career in general, but also when you're going through transition or change in your career. And I'll start with Madjeen.
Oh, thanks. So in sharing my answer to this, I'll share a little bit about my story as well. And I think that you can hear the thread in our stories, and no wonder we're all here today. I think a lot of what we're touching upon is there's a lot of conditioning from our cultural background, from our socialization, from being women. And so in each of our stories, you've heard how we've learned to decondition to get to a place where we are redefining what success means to us. And that's something that I had to learn too. I've learned over my career that for me, inner peace is success, because each time I take on a new role or went up the ladder thinking that was going to be for me, I learned that that's not for me through trial and error. And when I am in the space where I'm validated, where I'm valued, I don't feel that chaos in me anymore. I feel at peace. I feel at ease with myself. And my story in terms of coaches started when I'd been in a nonprofit space for 10 years. And I started to feel that internal shift. I wanted something different. And I thought a lateral move would be the the thing that I was looking for, and I took that step thinking that it was going to lead to my, ultimate goal, ultimate success of what I thought I was looking for. And pretty soon I started to realize it wasn't for me. And that's another thing about going through a change, going through transition, is your intuition. Because oftentimes our bodies can tell us before our mind can catch up, right? We are often quieting down our intuition with overworking our mind and like, oh, but this might be good for me, and so forth and so on. So a month into the position, I was like, this is not it. This is not the fit for me. But I was like, I'm not a quitter. I'm going to continue on. I continue on. And my body kept telling me different things. But I realized within 6 months' time that I'm not going to last. So in talking with my friends, as people have mentioned, Eliana and Desiree, really relying on your network, I started talking to folks, and someone mentioned a coach to me. And I kid you not, by that point, all of my money, my hard-earned money, was going through Chipotle, because that's all I was eating, morning, night, afternoon. It's like, because where I worked, the Chipotle was right down the street. So I would just go there for like whatever I needed a break. And then I decided to hire a coach. I started with a career coach because I thought, this is what I thought was for me. This is the career I thought was for me, but why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult? So maybe I need to do something else. But meanwhile, I was still in a toxic work environment, and I needed to manage up. So a friend of mine suggested that I get an executive coach. So I got an executive coach to help me manage up. So at this point, Chipotle and those two coaches were taking all of my money. If you've ever hired a coach before, if you're in the market for one, it's an investment. And I was in a place where I was really struggling to try and find out why is it not working? And if that's not working, what's next for me? And so it really helped me. Both coaches really helped me in different ways, but also simultaneously helped me really make a plan to get out of the situation that I was in. The executive coach helped me really craft my resignation letter, and even down to the conversation I was going to have with the CEO, because, we knew what was going to come up once I said I was going to resign. And the career coach started to help me think about all the skills, all the transferable skills that I already had and I could use somewhere else. But let me tell you this, again, you can have coaches, but you have to listen to yourself. I was thinking, let me just go to another, leadership position. And that's what I was looking for, but that's not what ended up happening. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let it go. And I just started talking, having conversation with anyone and everyone. And out of the blue, someone called me and said, hey, this just popped up on my Facebook page. I think given your background, you might be good for it. It wasn't a leadership position. It was coaching college students who had a shared story with my college experience. And I decided I am gonna demote myself from leadership role, and I'm gonna take the step. It was a big, big pay gap. But at the point, and that's one of the reasons why I do transitions well done, because your well-being matter. At the time, I was like, how do I keep myself sane? I had my daughter. My daughter was much younger than she is now. And how do I take care of myself so I can take care of my family? So I had to make that decision. I had to make that pivot. And, it took me, I didn't think that's where I was going to land next. If you had asked me at the time, that's not where I thought I was going to land next. And being at that job with another nonprofit, but not in a leadership role, has led me now to having my own coaching practice. So again, I never thought I would have a coaching practice, but I was willing, after some resistance, was willing to step into the unknown and make a decision. Because sometimes, again, like I said before, we're like on that brink of making a decision, afraid to let go of what we thought of the plan that we had. And so I had to make that decision for me, and it paid off really well.
Phenomenal story. That's amazing. And you actually kind of, I would say fell into coaching, but it was exactly where you were supposed to be. So that's awesome. So to that point, another thing that all four of us share is at some point, I think we were all working and we also had our own companies, right? And so part of transition and a part of even just growing and understanding your strengths and values is understanding that perhaps there is maybe something that you consider a side hobby or something that could maybe supplement your income to afford a coach, all those things. So I want the panel to talk about some tips for starting a business, and so, starting a side hobby and how you make that transition.
So I would start and would be, happy to give space for Eliana and Desiree to share, because as Felicia has shared, we all are in that space. Up until end of May, I was working full time while I was building out my coaching practice. And I think, again, I always go to distinction. I think building a business and having a hobby, they require different mindset, right? So I think of having a hobby, like, you're freelancing, or if you have a creative outlet that you use, that's your passion, you start that as a hobby, and then you can build it into a full-blown practice. But I think because being, in business, being a business owner, you're really, pursuing your passion while building a whole vision of what need are you seeing in the world, and what is it that you're able to offer? What value can you add to that, and helping people manage it in some ways, especially if you're in a service-based industry. I think of few things, your three components: your network, your resources, and funding. Those are the big three things to think about. And I bring in the mindset shift, because for each component, you have to have a mindset shift around each of them. I used to be really set against, reaching out to folks. I feel like I'm bothering people, I had that cringe, oh, here I go again, reaching out and asking for help. But you find out that that's what everyone is doing, right? And in the beginning, when I was attending networking event, soon after the networking event was done, someone was emailing me, oh, it was nice to chat with you. I'm like, oh my goodness, that was great. But you're learning those skills. Like, it's, that's part of building your brand. The visibility around your brand is reaching out to folks. And once you reach out to folks, then you start learning about the different resources that are available, the different funding that are available for your business. And there are, free resources out there that people can use while they're doing that. I, came from the mindset that I'm going to have this amount of money before I start, or I don't have all the resources I need. But if you think about, if you at least have 40%, if you know at least 40% of what you want to do, start there. You don't have to have all of it. And I know a lot of us are perfectionists. I say that myself. You have to have all of it planned out before you start. But I'm learning a lot about myself. And that's the biggest part about being a business owner. It's a self-development journey that you're on, because each decision you're making, each step that you're taking, each component of running a business, you're growing as a person and as a business owner. So those are some of the things that I would think about. And how do you leverage the relationships that you have with the folks that's already in your network, your established network? I thought I only know nonprofit folks, but I don't know who those nonprofit folks know. So it's always about being open and being vulnerable to asking for help. That's what I would say. Desiree, anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, so when I still work full time. So mine's a side hustle. The reason I even started the consulting business is because I kept getting asked, right, to do the work and speak about being inclusive leadership, and speak about these things and I was like, whoa, I'm just going to make it a business, because this is getting a little crazy. And I wasn't charging for it at the time. By the way, charge for everything. Just saying. Okay. Charge for everything. Do not do anything for free. Unless it improves your personal brand. So I started working on the brand, my personal brand, and that included part of what Madjeen was talking about is building that network of people. People I knew were able to help me get to the people I needed to know, and then the business just started flowing. Right now, I probably could quit my full-time job, but I actually like the fact that it's my side hustle. So I kind of keep it that way, and I'm very picky right now. So you have to build the business the way you want to build the business. I think is the important thing to know. I'm super picky about my clients. I'm super picky about who I coach. And I've told people no a million times, and that's okay, right? It's okay to say no. But I do agree the resource part, I think really gathering and putting together, like, who do you know? What resources are out there? What can I utilize? Do I have the money to do this? And is it something I want to do full-time or part-time? Or deciding those things is really fundamental before you kind of just jump in. I always tell people that everybody has an idea, right? And they want to do that idea and it's so exciting. But guess what? Even if you institute it, you got to sell that thing. So if you aren't any good at selling, you got to get good at it right now, right? So I was very lucky. I came from a sales background, so I can talk to anybody anytime, drop a hat in a room, and I'm like, I'll talk to you about anything. But not everybody has that skill set. So we can have these wonderful ideas and they can seem so valid, so great. But remember, you are the salesperson for your idea. So you've got to be out there, you've got to be talking about it, you've got to put yourself out there. And that is not the most comfortable place for everybody. So if you can't do it, you better find someone who can do it for you. Because entrepreneurship is not easy. And to me, the hardest part is getting someone to close the deal, right? It's not the idea, right? It's not usually the methodology. It's not usually the whatever. It's getting someone to sign on the dotted line. So just remember that as you think about it. I have so many executives who come to me and say, I thought this was going to be, it's a no-brainer. Everybody should want this thing. And I'm like, yeah, there's a million people who have that thing that everybody, supposedly wants. You got to get somebody to close the deal. So that would be my advice. Eliana.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute. There's a lot of things obviously to entrepreneurship and to owning your own business or to having your side hustle. But I think for me, the two tips that I'd like to give you guys, at least to begin with, is something similar that both Madjeen and Desiree just said, is that look to your resources near you. Whether you're in a city or in a smaller city, there are going to be resources that can help you develop your idea. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you don't know where to go next, look for the Chamber of Commerce, look for an incubator that is willing to take on an idea-based business, look for an accelerator program. I have been in 4 different incubators and I still feel I don't have an MBA. I don't have a degree in business. My degree is in biology. And everything I've learned is because I know, this is why I say that I let my parents down when I didn't pursue dentistry. Everything I've learned about business and my job, I worked at Travelers under entrepreneurship, and everything I learned in incubators, in webinars, in going to accelerator programs, and everything was something that I did because I wanted to develop my skills and expertise in that particular topic. So that's the first one. And then the second is to understand, yes, you have an idea for a problem. And so this is sort of building on the answer that Desiree just gave, is you might have an idea for a problem, but how are you poised to solve that problem? Is extremely important for you to understand what are the pain points of your customers and how you are poised to solve them in the best way possible. Because if you don't have a solution, if you don't actually have a value prop to provide to your customers, then you don't really have a business, because you won't be able to have customers, or you can maybe have a customer, but it won't be repeating customers. And I heard a person say this once, and it kind of stuck with me. If you're not making money, you don't have a business, unfortunately. And that is, it's lovely to have a hobby, but if you do want to kind of delve into entrepreneurship, you do kind of have to build that revenue. And so, and you can be poised to solve that problem. You just have to understand how your strengths are best suited for solving that problem.
I do want to add one thing. I know we almost time for questions and answer, but one thing that I often hear is, especially you also heard a little bit of it from us too, because our parents or even our younger selves had a different direction for ourselves. They haven't seen it done before, right? So that idea, that belief can sometimes hold us back. And I would say oftentimes, even if you haven't seen it done before, that doesn't mean you can't do it. Or maybe you haven't checked all the places to see if there's some iteration of what you're thinking of doing that's out there. So I honestly think that a lot of people hold on to that for a really long time before they're able to step out and make their idea, reality.
No, that's great. And all of you have added amazing things. To your point, entrepreneurship and even trying to have a business and working is all tough. So you definitely have to have a plan. It can't just be something that you do every now and then, because then it's not a business. It really is just a hobby. Our final question, and then we'll open it up. So if you have any questions, those are in the audience. If you want to put it in the chat now, that's great. Or if you want to hold on to it, you can raise your hand at the end. But we've talked a lot about networking through this, but I still want to give us the opportunity to talk a little bit about how important it is. Now, I'll start by telling you that networking is really what brought this panel together. So I met Madjeen and she became an amazing executive champion for the Climb. And in our discussions, we talked about this panel and how it was needed. And through her connections and me connecting, I was able to meet Eliana and Desiree. So the power of networking, and again, asking the question. And honestly, guys, I met Madjeen because I slid in her DMs and LinkedIn and was like, hey, I love your profile. I'd love for us to chat and connect. And I do that often because, number one, I love LinkedIn and there's so many amazing people on there. Like if I see a profile I like, I will send you a message, because what's the worst that can happen? Either you're going to say yes and you're going to respond, or you're not. And the yes, I gained something, and the no, I haven't lost anything. All I did was send a message. And so the significance of networking in building relationships. I'll start with Desiree.
Yeah, I always say it's the people you know, right? That it's always the people you know. I have gotten almost every job I've had because I knew someone, not because I necessarily went through I did go through all the interviews and everything, but I was referred usually by someone to that job. So my whole career has been built on shaking hands, what I call shaking hands and kissing babies, right? Because I think my wife says I'm on a tour when we leave, you gotta do the tour. She's like, geez, can we just get out of here? But I believe in that. I believe that there is so much power in meeting people doing significant things in the world, right? And you never know how that person can have an influence on your next step. So to me, I think it's always, and even for those who are introverted, I think even having coffee chats from LinkedIn one-on-one, if you're not a person that can go into these party situations and do a tour, you can slide into the DMs like Felicia did and set up a coffee chat, that one-on-one 15-minute moment. If you really like their profile, just building your followers and connections on LinkedIn so that you have that resource. Sometimes I tell people, like, if you really liked a job ad from a company on LinkedIn, you're like, that company sounds like so cool, but I already really love my job. I always tell people, like, follow that company and maybe talk to someone who works there and see if it's really true, because you never know, that person may be valuable to you if you get laid off. Or if you haven't, you could be like, hey, guess what? I know that person. I can go reach out to that person. I believe in the power of networking. I talk about it all the time. I preach about it all the time. And I get discouraged a lot when I hear people that say it's not a powerful tool. To me, it's one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal, is the ability to build a pool of people that you can tap on the shoulder when you need help, especially in entrepreneurship, but in career as well. Look at the market, the job market right now. I mean, it's horrendous right now, right? It takes so much to get a job. And I think people who are moving the needle, it's because they know someone, right? At that company, or they know someone who knows someone who knows someone, and they get in the door. When you're seeing, as a recruiter, I work in talent right now, when you see 1,000 applications for one role, it's overwhelming. And that's what recruiters are seeing right now. And so the ones they can put to the top is because they were referred by someone they know, right? And so it's just the way the world works. And you just have to develop that talent over time.
That was great. Eliana, you had something to add?
Well, I think we've said so many things about networking that really speak to the value of networking. And I agree with the two of you. We would not be sitting here if it wasn't for the power of networking. I think it was either Madjeen or I who also slid into each other's DMs and also were like, hey, let's have coffee. And I was able, and I was fortunate to meet her before she moved down to Florida when she was in Boston. And I think I've gotten as well all of the places that I've been to in my career with networking. And so, and it doesn't have to be the kind of networking where you go to a party or where you go to a networking event if you don't feel like that's for you. If you'd prefer to just do something one-on-one, again, there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, and there's no shame in saying to someone, hi, I love your profile, or I really think that I'd like to pursue this career, or perhaps pursue this this company. Would you be willing to sit down and just tell me what you're looking for, or how I might be able to get there at some point? And so I think it just really broadens your perspectives, and it can really help you get to the places where you want to get. So I am a big believer in networking. I, like Desiree, my husband calls me the mayor of, I used to live in the Hartford area. He's like, you're like the mayor of Hartford. I mean, you knew everyone. And that's why I wanted to start the Bold Women Collective in Boston, because I felt like I had lost that when I moved to Boston. And so it's definitely something that I love. I am like an extrovert, introvert. So I really encourage all of you guys to network.
That is awesome. So I'm with the time that we have left, and sorry, we've gotten into such a good conversation. Are there any questions for those that are in the audience? And I don't want everyone to be shy or try to all go at the same time. I know you just have so much that you want to ask us. Going once.
No, nothing. I mean, it's because we laid it all out.
We laid it all out.
I mean, all over the place. We just did the job.
Well, while we're waiting on questions, if there are questions, one thing I would say about networking is think of it as you're planting seeds, because oftentimes you're having a conversation with someone, it may not happen the timing, the way you thought it would happen, but you never know what would come up. And I think for each of us here, when we had our conversations, the first conversation we had, we didn't think this was going to lead to the end of July, a panel, a fireside chat. And a lot of the things that has happened for my business has been, 6 months after I had a conversation with someone, hey, Madjeen, I just heard of this thing. Are you interested in doing it? So I do think that oftentimes, because we're like instant gratification, if we don't hear back right away, we think, oh, that didn't go so well, but give it time to marinate for whoever it is, or for the right opportunity to come up for you as your network.
I also
That is
wanted to say
awesome.
one last thing. This may be a good time for you guys that are here on the Fireside Chat to practice networking, whether it be on the chat saying, hey, can I have your LinkedIn account so I can ask you a question later, or asking a question now, because this is tied to the idea of selling either yourself, right? Because we're also selling ourselves as a brand, or selling your products or services. It is being able to speak up and ask questions. And it's not easy. It's to this day something that I have to practice. I mean, I've done a lot of public speaking, but it is not something that comes naturally to people. And so practice, whether it's being this like smaller kind of setting or in a bigger setting, it's important to continue to practice.
Totally agree. So, I can see the chat, but if you want to send private messages, that is fine too. But in our last couple of minutes, I want to thank, first of all, the panel, Eliana, Desiree, Madjeen. I have so enjoyed this conversation. It actually even helped me thinking about transitions in my own career. So much appreciated. Thank you guys for everyone who's logged in. If you were not here at the beginning, this is a part of the Climb organization. The Climb is a 501c3 committed to increasing the number of women of color in leadership and managerial positions. And so if you are not already a member of the Climb, I'd love to have you as a member. It's free and you get resources like this. Every other month, we're going to have an event on Zoom. And then the months in between, we have local meetups. And so lots of things. Also, what we're launching next month is a Women of Color coaching network. So for those who heard the amazing story from these coaches, I will tell you, for me, it was transformative. And I want to make sure that every woman of color who desires to learn about it and to have a coach gets the opportunity. And so if you're a member, you will have access to the directory to be a part of the Women of, or to, find a coach through the Women of Color Coaching Network. Again, thank you guys so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in September.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.